All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get started here. See, we still get some folks coming online, but it is 1 o'clock Central where we're at, and we'll get started with this brown bag. USACE in the construction branch up there, and work closely with the Construction Management Technology Modernization Office led by the folks at the RMS Center that are online, our L&M support contractor for RMS, to put this together and give you all an update on the CUI release that will be coming out. So with that, we will get started with the presentation, and go ahead, next slide. Today we're going to cover a CUI overview of the tools that RMS is going to provide with these changes on dealing with CUI, and basically the document marking and handling requirements related to CUI. We're going to talk through some resources that are being provided in the system library, and then we will go through how you set up a contract and a new tab that's been added to the contract setup module to indicate if the contract is CUI or not. We'll show some changes being made to the reports and document upload areas within RMS, and then touch on some somewhat minor things, but summary reports, the security classification module mostly for district admins, and then the CUI cover page changes. So that's what we're going to run through today. Next slide. Okay, so I want to give everyone a background of where we're at with CUI. Currently, the Corps of Engineers does not have a CUI, does not have CUI guidance that they put out specific to how to deal with CUI on engineering and construction projects. So we're mostly taking our guidance from DOD Instruction 5200.48. And there's a link to that in the end of these slides, which will be put out with the release notes for this release coming out. So we wanted to, we saw the release of CUI changes to RMS that were done previously, and we wanted to make some changes to make it a little easier for the field to understand how to use those tools and provide some more resources and guidance on the whole concept of CUI, and how you could be expected to use RMS to deal with it on your projects and on any documents or data that is CUI. So that is the point of the updates that we're making. And if you could back up to that last slide real quick, sorry. What we wanted to really point out here, and you'll see why the items highlighted in red here are important once we get into the actual screenshots of the updates that are done, especially on that contract setup CUI tab. The current guidance out there starts from the National Archives guidance on CUI, and then DOD has put together again this instruction. In this instruction, it makes it very clear that if we are giving contractors CUI, especially putting CUI documentation in our contracts, then it must be identified as such explicitly in the contract. So if your contract, to start with, doesn't say that it is a CUI contract in whole, or that certain parts of it are CUI, you likely do not have a CUI contract. And that should make it a lot easier for you to decide whether to check the yes or no button on the CUI question on the contract setup module. And then the DOD guidance is also very clear that we need to tell contractors how to deal with CUI should we give it to them. So these, real quick, the RMS tools and the features that we've updated and changed related to CUI, they're not really they're not the be all end all to CUI. They are tools to help the project teams use RMS to comply with those marking and handling requirements. At the end of the day, the diversity of the Corps of Engineers project portfolio is so, it's beyond what headquarters, at least in our position, is able to really give you specific guidance on what is and isn't CUI. Each project team will need to determine that on their own, in coordination with their end user, their stakeholders, your local security office, and the folks on your team are going to have to figure out what is and what isn't CUI. The intent of what we're going through here today is simply to show you how to use the tools in RMS should you come across or have to deal with CUI. So next slide. Again, just some points here. RMS includes some CUI tools to assist project teams. It's really up to that individual project team to know what the CUI requirements are, and then highlight that specifically in the contract per the DOD instruction, and make sure it's very clear that the team and the contractor and everybody knows what it is and how to deal with it. And then it is good to understand, and we want to make sure you all are aware, it is okay and possible to store CUI in RMS. It is clear to house CUI data. And then if if you're unsure of what is CUI, or if your contract is CUI or not, the most important thing is you talk to your team leadership and your contracting officer, your resident engineer, ACO, your PM. Get that group together to talk about it if you're not sure or unclear. With that, we are going to turn it over to our O&M contractor who's prepared some screenshots of the features and the way the CUI tools will be updated as we go forward. Again, I think we've made it a little simpler, a little clearer to understand, and hopefully provided some resources to at least help you know how to use those new tools once they get implemented here this Friday.
Thank you. So to get started, we'll take a look at the System Library menu. A new module has been added called Controlled Unclassified Information Policy. Right down here. And this new module will contain 2 links to the latest policies for your reference. The first link will be to the DOD Instruction 5200.48, otherwise known as the official DOD CUI Implementation Guide. The second link is going to be to the HQ USACE Standard Operating Procedures, as Derek mentioned earlier, which are located under the USACE KMP portal. Next, we'll take a look at Contract Setup. So to select the CUI status of a contract, open up the contract and navigate to the Contract Setup submodule within the Administration module. A new tab has been added in the Contract Setup view called CUI. And this is specifically to address the CUI requirements. This new tab provides basic guidance for CUI, which is this verbiage down here. If your contract meets the requirements found in DOD 5200.48, you will select yes, and otherwise you will just select no and move on with your day. When yes is selected, the statement "this contract contains CUI, required CUI controls must be followed" is going to be added on the header of the screen, and this header will continue to show for every screen in RMS. Also, after selecting yes, 2 more prompts will appear. First is going to be this whole and in part selection. And the next one is going to be a checkbox. So upon selecting this checkbox, the CUI markings can be edited to meet the needs of the contract, or it can be left as the default. And the default is, as you see on the screen, it will be Controlled Unclassified Information. If you don't know any of the answers to these questions, please do contact your project or contract leadership for specific guidance to the contract CUI status. So, in addition to the contract reports, when a contract is marked CUI in whole, all contract reports will be printed with the CUI header and footer, which was selected in Contract Setup. So it will contain the CUI header and footer as default, or whatever was entered into that text box. And for contracts that are marked CUI in whole, the print security markings header and footer checkbox will be selected and it will not be editable. So a user will not be able to select or deselect that for a contract marked CUI in whole. And also there is a statement below just reminding the user of the contract's CUI status and letting them know that the header and footer will be included in the printed report. For contracts that are marked CUI in part, the contract reports will have the option to be printed with the security markings header and footer. So as you can see, this checkbox is available to be edited, so a user can select or deselect that. And there's also a statement reminding the user of the CUI, the contract's CUI status, and that the appropriate CUI handling requirements must be followed. So there are some reports that are going to be considered controlled unclassified information no matter what. So regardless of a contract's CUI status, the basic change document, or BCD, the change request register with government estimate, and the mod routing slip reports will always contain the controlled unclassified information header and footer. These reports can be found in the contract reports module, and they are also generated as part of change requests and contract modifications. Here are some examples of those reports with the controlled unclassified information header and footer. And there's the mod routing slip. Also, another update that's been made is to the document package upload screens. So any attachments that contain CUI that are going to be submitted to the RMS application should be checked to ensure that proper CUI or security markings are included in the documentation before upload. And a notice has been added on the screens to remind the users of that. For changes and modifications that use RMS Word templates, the CUI or security marking headers and footers cannot be added by RMS. So these will need to be added to the documents either to the template in the library or when the document is generated. And the same notice from the document package upload screens is also stated here. All right, moving on to the summary reports area. Users can now print a CUI summary report by going to the summary reports tile in the contract selection view. And from there, you can search for the CUI summary report and double click on that report to generate it. The report parameters view will appear. In the security classification section, you can add CUI markings to be included on the CUI summary report. And then you will need to select which contracts to include. And then at the bottom, you will be able to select if you'd like to see CUI in whole or in part contracts, CUI not selected for contracts, and contracts that do not contain CUI. Here is a preliminary example of that report. The final version may look a little different, but it should be similar. And as you can see, the selection that was made for this report was seeing contracts in CUI in whole and in part. If needed, CUI markings can now be added to any summary report by entering the desired text into that same security classification section. As an example, we used enter security markings here, and the report did print out the desired text in that text box. Also added is going to be the new contract security classification module in the district office menu. This is primarily going to be for district administrators to be able to set the CUI status of multiple contracts without having to enter each one of them individually. Here's that view. The blue tiles at the top can be used to sort the list and narrow down the list of contracts. Any changes made in this classification column will reflect in the contract setup for that corresponding contract. The selection can be edited to whole, in part, or none for no. Be sure to click the back button to save any changes. And now moving on to the CUI cover page. This is going to be available in the contract reports area, and it will just be available for users to use with documentation, and then a text box will be provided to enter categories, limited dissemination controls, special instructions, points of contact, etc. if needed. Again, please contact your contract leadership to see if CUI requirements for the contract will require this cover sheet to be added with documentation. Here's an example of the CUI cover page. And finally, there are some references listed here specifically regarding CUI guidance. All right, these slides will be made available to you as I'm sorry, I'm not sure when actually, but they will be made available to you soon. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask now.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is for submitted payrolls, PII now CUI, submitted by the contractor. Should we be looking for CUI markings on these submittals? Are you referring to the payrolls module itself, or are they doing separate submittals in the submittal section? Since the user is not responding to that,
They said submittals.
Submittals. Oh, sorry, it's not showing up on my side. So the submittals themselves, for either. So it's basically set up for the contract document package. So if it's placed in the document package, they should be marking it as either CUI or not when the document is placed into the document package itself. And we have another question that I'm looking at right now. With regards to the question, when I attempt to upload the IGE, PMO, PNM, and the mod package, I get a prompt to include the CUI with it. One of the things is currently this is not out in production yet. So right now, what you have inside of RMS is not going to be what we just showed you. This is just so that you're prepared for when the release goes out into RMS. Does that answer your question? Excellent. Are there any other questions?
And I just want to, we covered a lot of stuff right there and understand that, but there's a couple of key things to keep in mind. One is what is currently in RMS and what will be a huge change regarding CUI on Friday with the release is RMS will no longer prompt you to print a cover sheet every time you do something, because that honestly was not being used correctly. A cover sheet is only required for this DOD CUI guidance. If you are physically printing out a document containing CUI, you need to put a cover sheet on it after you print it. Or if you're going to email or distribute that document electronically beyond RMS, then when you pull it down and print it onto your computer or wherever out of RMS as a PDF or a report or whatever, as long as that document resides on your computer, it does not need to have a cover sheet. It doesn't need to have a cover sheet when it's in RMS. It only needs a cover sheet when you disseminate it or physically print it out. So keep that in mind. That is why RMS will no longer prompt you for printing cover sheets every time you want to run a report, because we don't know if you're going to just run that and leave it on your computer and not disseminate it. As a as a user that may, if you do print a report or pull a document out that has CUI markings, you need to understand that when you go to disseminate that or physically print it, then you add that cover sheet. And that is not, I think what we're trying to do is eliminate that confusion and honestly make it easier for you all when you are taking items out of RMS. And if you're not disseminating or printing them, you don't need to worry about a cover sheet. The other thing is anything that you knowingly upload into RMS or you generate, as was mentioned in the, where we talk about generating documents using the word generator in RMS. If you generate or upload anything that eventually gets stored in RMS that you know is CUI, you need to mark that in the header and footer. You do not need to put a cover sheet. You mark it the CUI classification in the header and footer. That way, when someone else goes to download that information later, they see the header and footer markings and they know if they disseminate it beyond their own control of their own computer, then print it or disseminate it, they would have to add a cover sheet at that time. That's two of the ways to really think about CUI and RMS is either are you putting it in or are you taking it out, and that's when you have to determine how you mark it or handle it appropriately. Are there any other questions for the team?
We've had a couple in the chat. Mostly people are wanting to know how do you determine CUI, who determines CUI, and those kinds of things. Basically, the DOD instructions in the 5200.48 Controlled Unclassified Information is what will have that information if you want to decide what is deemed as CUI or not. Who in the contract is responsible for determining if a document is CUI?
Well, that is up to the project team to determine based on the type of project they are constructing, designing, engineering. It'll probably be something that needs to be discussed amongst the, the project team and the stakeholder. The end user, the sponsor is probably mostly going to have input on that. That's something that the resin office, the PM need to bring up as projects are being starting out in that planning and design phase. That should be one of the first things discussed. Every contract the Corps puts out for bid has a form that has to be run through the security office to determine if it is, if it does need to have these markings or not. So that should all be worked out with the PDT, and it's all based on the unique project characteristics and needs. So that's why it's really important that the team get together and discuss that very early on in project planning. So, and when we talk about the project in the yes or no question, we're talking about the plans and specs at that point in that question in RMS about is the contract CUI in whole or in part. That means, do those contract documents need to be, are they all marked CUI? I mean, if it's in whole, it's going to be pretty obvious. There's going to be CUI on the header and footer of every contract document, plans and specs. And if you don't see that, then it's not a CUI contract in whole, most likely. If it is in part, then there might be portions of those plans and specs that have CUI in that header and footer, or there might be a statement in the spec somewhere in the contract that would talk about it. Guidance that's out there right now, again, doesn't get too specific about how you do the marking, just says you have to, or how you determine if it's in whole or in part. So, what we've done with this update to RMS is tried to make the tools a little easier to understand. We provided some resources. There's an SOP in the district library we covered. That will be included with the CUI release notes that are coming out with the patch release on Friday. So along with these slides will be provided. We're just trying to make it easier to understand, easier to not have so many prompts about CUI if you mark that contract no, which should help everyone tremendously. We're not going to be just printing CUI cover sheets on all sorts of random stuff like ENG 93s and everything else. So, but at the end of the day, RMS, as it's being reconfigured for CUI, is providing tools to the field to deal with CUI should the project team determine that the contract is either CUI in whole or in part per the DOD guidance. If you have any questions, I would talk to your chain of command, your leadership. Again, the Corps, as of, we've been working on this, has not published guidance specifically how the Corps should address CUI markings on engineering and construction projects. So we have to go with this higher level DOD guidance at the moment. So
We have another couple of questions. The first one was, we, in parentheses, contracting, were informed that PMs will be responsible for identifying all applicable CUI documents and CT will safeguard thereafter. Just need to verify it begins with the PM at the initiation of the PCF cabinet.
yeah, I would say that's not necessarily, I mean, I don't know where that came from, but my response, I just typed it in, is that the PDT, along with the project stakeholders and sponsors, should work together to determine if the contract is CUI. I would say it's not any one individual's 100% requirement because we don't have any guidance that says that. It's the team's requirement to figure it out. So just like everything we do on our projects, we need to work together as a team.
Would you say that this is something that should be reviewed during BCOES?
It should be reviewed before you even start developing contract documents and when you're in that planning and design phase. But if you do a BCOS review and you don't see anything indicating anything about CUI, it would be a great question to throw in the your review as a comment, asking specifically, has anyone looked and checked to make sure the contract, is or is not CUI in whole or in part? Be great. That should be a BCOS comment on every BCOS we do if we aren't sure. I saw the question about where do you secure CUI in a locked desk, whatever. Again, you have to refer to the guidance out there. It honestly, I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's not there. The guidance isn't as clear as it probably could be. The training could be better. There's a lot, I think, more to come on CUI. I suspect at some point, as CUI guidance gets further refined and further put out by Army or Corps, then we may have to make some changes again. But in the meantime, all we can really do is refer you to the current guidance. I think one of the better references, if you go up one slide, is the DOD-CUI.mil. If you haven't been to that site, that's a good one to go to. It provides a link to the training. It provides a link to some of the to the actual 5200.48 and also the registry. That's one reason why we have the option to click the field to change the marking, because there are a lot of different potential markings for more specialized types of projects or CUI related documents. And that's why that option is there in RMS. If something you do requires a more specific marking, you can make that change. And it also goes, there are some pretty good references in that site for training aids that can help the team figure out if that project is CUI and how to handle and mark it appropriately. There's some marking training aids, handling training aids in that site. So probably the best resource out there right now for the teams to use.
Doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat. Are there any other questions?
I did. I've got a quick question. Sort of a summary takeaway. This is not only to input information into RMS, that's CUI, but anybody who then downloads anything out of RMS and makes a hard copy out of it needs to make sure it's got the proper notations, proper cover sheets, and things like that on it. Because everything that's in RMS, I'm assuming, is a secure, secure platform. And uploading information into RMS off of an encrypted computer is, that's part of the secure process. Just wanted to vet that and make sure I'm thinking about that right.
Yeah, I think you are. If your computer that you have a CAC and a pin to put in to get into is capable of holding CUI, probably has all sorts of it on it right now, potentially, depending on what you keep on your computer. The minute you take a document and you upload it to RMS, if you look at that document, you've got to know, am I putting a document that has CUI in it? And if you do, and that document's never left your computer before, you may need to go into that document and put a CUI header and footer on the document per the guidance, and before you would make that upload. That way, when someone goes to download that might have access to it now that it's in RMS, they would know that when they download it, they need to handle it appropriately and may need to put a cover sheet on it at some point if they disseminate it beyond their own computer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. And for the project that one of the projects we're working on with the Corps, we have CUI information, but we've also, the project team got together and we sanitize. We permanently redacted a way to trace it back to any original file, and we worked with information like that throughout the course of the project. But some of the final deliverables are going to have that information added back in. So 99% of what we transfer in RMS is not CUI because it's been sanitized per agreement through the project team. But our final deliverables will be CUI. So, I need to know, I just want to verify when it comes time to make those final deliverables, I need to walk through this process and make sure they're identified as CUI.
Yeah, and you'll want to make sure that the contract specifically states that, and then also make sure the contractor understands how to handle those documents. And I think what you pointed out is a great best practice or lesson learned or whatever you want to call it. Someone had mentioned earlier, when should that be discussed? The project team at the very beginning of planning should get together, and one of the first questions that you get asked, along with hundreds of others that get asked when you start a project and start planning it, is will this project have anything that would fall into the category of CUI in the documentation? And then I think it's a really good best practice to try to sanitize as much of that as possible out of those plans and specs. It just makes it that much easier for the team going forward.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Well, we'll have electronic AutoCAD files that has information on it that now locates street names, building numbers, and other things that the client, our client said, we don't want that on. That to us is what makes this CUI. So we've removed that information. And that's really simplified a lot of things, just as far as, now we can go to subcontractors with hard copies of information that they don't have to have the training for. Simplifies, using and distributing project documents and really executing the job without compound, because a lot of subs, surveyors, things like that, they're what we found is they're kind of just getting up to speed with a lot of this. So if we can simplify that for them at this stage, that's a good step.
I see a question about photos. I mean, unless you're in, I suspect, a secure area inside a secure facility, that probably is not going to be an issue. But again, if any part of your project and your stakeholder, end user, whoever you're building that for, that should be a discussion you have well in advance of project execution. Is any photos that are going to be taken, are they even allowed to be taken or not? And if so, do they have to be vetted and whatnot? So that's a very good question, but it's also a very project specific question. I mean, I've worked on projects in weapons secure areas where you couldn't even take a camera in. So, but there's also, some bases have photo requirements, but you think about right now, everybody's got a camera on their phone. So, it's a good question, but it certainly can't be answered by us. It's very project specific and probably only most likely would be an issue on those projects that are done in secure areas. But again, go back to your project team on that if you have concerns or questions.
One last question. Is this rolled out now for existing projects as well as new projects?
It is. I believe that guidance states that, if you've got a project that was developed prior to the CUI stuff coming out and had FOUO on it, you do not need to remarket CUI. You would still follow the FOUO protocols. But that's, I think the biggest thing to understand here is, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like the guidance rollout on this has been quite as aggressive as it maybe should be. So I think there's more to come on this topic. The thing with RMS is it's a little different animal than some of our other systems. CFMs, they can pretty much go in and say, well, it's all CUI. Contractors don't get into CFMs. A lot of the data we have is just purely public data. I mean, think about contractors and their submittals. It's all product data from commercially available websites and all those sorts of things from vendors. So it's not CUI. A lot of what we deal with every day is not CUI. But we are a little different with RMS because we do have that interface where the contractors can pull data out and put data in. And, our projects have just a very high degree of difference from one to another. If you're working on a, secure facility compared to just, doing paving a street or something, you're talking completely different animals. So that's why it's really important to have these discussions early in project planning, get it figured out, have a plan on how you're going to deal with it. And hopefully the way we've set up RMS with this new release coming out Friday, it will make that easier and those tools a little easier to use in RMS for the teams to understand that. And then at the end of the day, it's really up to the individual to have enough awareness to know if a document is CUI or not, or at least to know they should probably ask somebody if it is or not, either before they disseminate it or before they mark it or not mark it and put it into the system. Any other questions? Yeah, hopefully you'll find the changes useful and a little easier to deal with, and some of the guidance that we'll put out. Like I said, there'll be the release notes, these slides, and an SOP that will be sent out before the release goes out. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody joining today. The video of this will be posted as well to our YouTube page. Is that right, team?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll get that up before too long. Actually, team, get me that link once you have it, and then we'll put that in the release notes email tomorrow as well. With that, thank you, everybody. Hopefully that was helpful, and understand there might still be questions out there. Feel free to I think the first place you got to remember is go to your project team. If you have any questions about the actual tools in RMS related to CUI, talk to your project team, talk to your district administrator. If you can't get answers, call the help desk or put in a ticket, and we will do our best to help you figure it out. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to everybody later.